Okay, we're live. I'm here with my guest, Nick. I'm going to have Nick introduce himself and then we're going to get into some strongman training. So, Nick, tell us about your journey and we'll get going, man.
Appreciate you having me on today, man. It's good talking to you again. Yeah, my name's Nick O'Brien. I've been coaching for like 13, 14 years by now. Uh, you and I met way back in Salisbury, and that's where I kind of initially started interning and volunteering there after I kind of got hurt playing lacrosse. Um, from there, kind of worked my way up. When I did an internship at Georgetown, came back to Salisbury, did a GA, went to Loyola for an internship, came back to Salisbury, left, did an internship. As everybody knows, you don't get a job after your master's degree right away. So moved back to California, put my stuff in a storage unit, and from there interned at San Diego State, taking the good old train down Pacific Coast 1, and got a job back at Loyola. So I went back across the country, picked my shit up from the storage unit, got my truck back. Worked there for about 2.5 years and made the trek back over to California again, to Fresno State, where I was there for 5 years as an assistant coach. Great time, learned a lot of stuff over there. Lots of staffs, like 3 different ADs, 3 different head football coaches, the whole gamut, 4 different strength coaches, kind of crazy. Um, from there, went to Jacksonville University, with an old teammate of mine, for 2 years, enlisted in the Army and got commissioned in March of 2023, hence my beard being gone. And now I'm in the Army Reserves as an officer, and I transitioned right across the street to the University of North Florida, where I'm currently at. So coaching over there, getting ready for that spring season, and it's a little bit of everywhere. 8 schools now. It's getting taxing.
Yeah, I bet. The thing for me is like I've been with the Red Sox now 8 or 9 years, whatever, and my family still doesn't really understand strength and conditioning no matter how many times I tell them. And so they just think like you go one place and that's it, like it's like the old school days, like your dad or your mom or whatever works one place for like 25, 30 years and then they retire. And I'm like, you guys don't understand, like my story is very, very rare. It does not happen. For every one of me, there's like 50 of my friends that are like, yeah, I've been here, I've been there, I've been here. And like, so your story is probably a little bit further than some people's, but it's not that far off. And like you said, you have to get an internship after your master's degree. And like I told you before we started recording, like my brother's getting into the field now, and I'm trying to tell him like, don't pigeonhole yourself into one thing because you're going to be chasing this crazy rabbit hole that you're going to be all over the country. And like it's fun to do in your 20s, it's not so fun when you get into your 30s and you have to like kind of figure out your life. um so yeah, I mean, we've kept in touch over the years, and to be honest, like you're probably the first person in the field that like took me under their wing with the baseball team at Salisbury and kind of showed me like this is what training for a baseball team looks like. Before that, I was like, straight up muscle and fitness bodybuilding magazines. Like I didn't know
Oh
anything, and
yeah.
like between you and like Matt Nine just kicking me to the wolves and like, hey, just go learn. Like you're an idiot, but go learn. And like you're like, okay, well, you are an idiot, but let me take you under your wing and like teach you some things. Like I'm glad we've kept in touch over the years, and your story is like very, very like real in the field. So I'm glad that like you're able to share it and people can hear it and be like, oh shit, like strength and conditioning is kind of crazy. I don't know if I don't know if that's good or bad, or if I should pursue my own thing. But
Think
the
it
one
through.
thing,
Think it through.
yeah, the one thing I wanted to discuss, obviously, in addition to like doing all of the coaching and all of the moving, you talk about like moving your stuff around. Like I would imagine that includes your strongman implements as well.
Yeah.
So I want to know, like, for anybody that's listening that's interested in strongman, you also introduced me to that between you and Andy at Salisbury. Like, let's talk strongman. Like, how did you get into it? Your own competing, and then like, do you use it with athletes? And then we'll kind of just see where we go to.
Yeah. I forgot another school too. I was at American. So
Yes,
I
that's right. I
interned
remember that too.
interned there. I was leaving Baltimore to commute down to DC and then sleep in my truck until the parking meters turned on at 6 a.m. when my alarm went off, and I put quarters in it and I go to work. That was 5 internships, $0 total. So that was cool.
Negative
Yeah.
dollars with the parking meters.
Oh yeah. I mean, Georgetown was $20 a day to park there. And I got booted, I think, at least 4 times because by the time you get there in the morning,
Mhm.
the teller's not there yet. So you got to get a boot, I guess. But yeah, strongman. I got started. Andy Deck was the same person too. Like he was still competing at a high level, professional in like the 105 kilos at that time, and he had a pretty big collection of gear. And then we started kind of adding to it a little bit more over time. We started building some stuff and collecting stuff. But that was like the first introduction that I got to like traditionally what it is, and we would go train at the unit and kind of have our strongman Saturdays. Um, yeah, he took me under his wing, and then Mike Hedleski was there. There's a few other GAs around that time as well, but like Mike was a huge power lifter, and he would come just mess around with us, or we'd try to put his bench shirt on and watch him kind of fumble around with like 600 pounds in his hands. It was just ridiculous. Um, I think his best deadlift was still like 814, like raw. Yeah, that guy's crazy. And then yeah, Andy kind of let me just come play around. He's really good at coaching people when it comes to strongman and like kind of introducing people, but you're sometimes quick to get a first invite. You're very rarely going to get a second invite. So I was happy that I kind of got a second invite. I got to come back and like see what it was really about, but no, I just kind of fell in love with it. It was definitely fun. It was interesting. It was something that helped me to replace not being able to play sports anymore because I had like a pretty serious injury. I couldn't take face-offs. I couldn't push off my left hip, like my glute. I tore my piriformis deadlifting, and it didn't heal well. So being able to like still do strongman stuff, couldn't deadlift still in my stupid skateboarding shoes, like huge puffy Osiris and DC shoes. Um, couldn't deadlift to save my life still because it wouldn't do anything, but I could still like do all the farmer's carries and yoke and Atlas stones and stuff. And it was so cool to kind of realize that there was such a non-traditional sport out there that people like do and compete in. And in that time, like you didn't see a lot of it. You don't, it's not as mainstream as it is now where you can go to like a commercial gym where Rogue Fitness sells honestly anything. You can buy like, I'm pretty sure Rogue sells like some of the replica, like even Husafell stones. That I know they made one. Someone made a replica Denny stones and stuff too. So like you're talking about implements that are centuries old and they're just rocks. Like legends used to carry those same rocks. And now you got a company that's making a mold of it. They made real Conan's wheel from Conan the Barbarian for a competition, and people were dying. Like the thing is so big, they had to construct it in the building. Like it's grown so much since I think my first competition was either 2010 or 2011. And it's grown so much from that. But the style training's so cool, the variety of it. Like you're right, traveling around as much as I have puts a pretty big toll on moving. Unless you're at a high level, most places aren't going to pay to reimburse you in college strength conditioning. So the more you collect, the more pounds go into moving. And if you've ever had to talk to a moving company about, hey, what size house, like what size apartment are you moving? Like, oh, it's 1 bedroom, it's a studio. It's like, okay, so you have about this much stuff. I was like, yeah, but I have a storage unit. Like, oh, so like 15, 20 boxes. I was like, yeah, try like 40, 45 pound plates, a couple axle bars, Atlas stones, a what? It's like a few kegs with 150 pounds of pebbles in it. They're like, you gonna dump that out? I was like, probably not. So yeah, that's where it kind of started, and it's hard to kind of compete as often as I'd like to, just like between games and stuff like that. And then probably 6 or 7 years ago, I think, I started competing in Highland Games too. So I kind of go back and forth between those. Highland Games are just a little bit easier on the body and they're fun. You can have a beer as you're throwing the events. You get sunburn a lot more, but I get to wear a kilt, so it's pretty cool. But yeah, both of them have been super fun. Strongman's been awesome to kind of get a hold of. The community is great. Training for it's fun. Competitions are kind of slowly fading for me, but I'm hoping to get a few more. I got a few Highland Games already this year lined up. I got one done before, like around Christmas, which was fun. Hadn't practiced in a year and a half and just went out and chucked some shit. Um, with strongman ones, they don't met. There's all the states I've lived in, they don't mess around with. So you're not going there on a whim unless you're like willing to drop a log on your neck. And I don't have great insurance, so
Yeah, the when I was a kid, it was like World's Strongest Man was on TV, and it was all the heavyweights, the top of the top. One of the guys that was from my area, they would bring him to like school show and tell, and he had competed in the World's Strongest Man, and he would like rip phone books in half or blow up like hot air balloons, like the old ones that your mom would put on her back, like to heat up, and he'd be like, blowing
oh,
this shit up, like one of
those are no
those.
joke. Those are no joke. I've heard people like blowing up lungs. It's not a joke doing those things. They'll shoot back into you and they'll pop a lung.
Right, yeah, so he was doing that kind of stuff when we were really little, so I'm like, "Wow, this is kinda cool," and then actually, it's funny, I was telling Karen the other day, we went out there's this lighthouse by where I grew up, and there's a bunch of random stones, and as kids, we were like, whoever can pick up a stone and throw it in the water gets points, but you get points for a bigger stone and distance covered. And that was like where my love of just picking up random shit came from. Like I'd pick up this stone and then I'd have to walk across these other stones and throw it in the water just to like show off to my friends for no reason. And then as you know, I worked at Big Lots for a long time. So I was like picking up furniture and like climbing on shit on shelves to get, these weird objects. So I've always been drawn to like just the unorthodox type of training, and like the power lifts never really did it for me. Like I do love to deadlift, but I'm not good at those things. I like problem solving something. That's why we've been getting into rock climbing lately. It's like I like the idea of having a problem to solve and making it physical. So like the first time I had ever gone to train with you and Andy, and Mike was there too, and then Inman was there, like we had a blast, and we were out in the street like pushing sleds and like throwing up, and like I don't know, we like picking up the stones, and then like we were making a stone in powers.
Oh yeah.
um and like there was like a whole section of the weight room that was like
Yeah. Whoops.
closed off to like make that stone. And then I bought my own mold, and I never made a stone because I was always living in like an apartment, and my wife is
Oh.
like, "Where are you going to put an Atlas stone in a third floor apartment?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'll figure it out." And she's like, "You're an idiot. You're not, don't do that." So I should have got a storage unit. That's what I should have done because I accumulated so much shit over the years. But it's just fun, man. It's a lot of fun. And like if people haven't done it, it's hard. It's fucking taxing in a way that like traditional weightlifting is not. But it's also like really rewarding to like fucking tow a car or something. You're like, oh, this is like hard, but I figured it out. We used to do like the car squat simulator, and like
Oh yeah.
that shit is just fun, it's just different, and like it taxes you in a different way. So have you used it with your athletes? And then like I would assume if you have, like, they're probably not picking up Atlas stones the same way that like you and I are, because we don't care if we like break our back or something. You know what I mean? Like it's probably a little bit more tame. Like
Yeah.
how have you found success like implementing that, or have you avoided it with your athletes?
Yeah, it depends on the team. Kind of it depends on the time of season. There's a lot of factors. I know I spoke on this like one point for a presentation like pretty extensively, and Um, there's a lot of factors that kind of go into it when you, the same as like any general strength conditioning program. You don't want to really just throw your athletes to the wolves without having given some preparation, even though like you were talking about like picking up rocks like outside, like it's the same. My one of my favorite pictures of all time is Pujanowski. Someone, it was him. I think he was carrying anvils on his side, like as a farmer's carry. And if anybody's ever seen him, like he is like short, like jacked, and I think he won 4 or 5 times World's Strongest Man. He was wild. He was wild. I think he did MMA for a little bit. I think he spent some time in jail. The guy's awesome. But there was a Photoshop picture of him instead of the anvils carrying like unlimited groceries in both hands.
Yes.
So it's it's a give and take because you kind of do strongman-esque training all the time, like in your normal life. It's just it's to a different degree when you start adding in it as a training effect versus like daily life. So yeah, I added into as many teams as I can, but it has to fit the program a little bit. I have to have the equipment in some sort of capacity. Most strongman stuff, I try to do the dynamic things, um, like carrying, like any of the walks, like sandbag cleans or stuff like that, where you're moving a little bit more, versus like some of the pressing, like odd presses and stuff. Because I think that's where you start getting a little bit of trouble. And one, you have to have the specific implement for those. I can get people to walk with anything. I've done like a yoke carry. You could do Zercher carries and crush them. You can do yoke carries and like put fat grips and put it on the back of your traps so it actually is like a thicker bar and it's not just crushing your spine as you go. They sell Spud Inc. sells so many things. Like Cerberus Strength has like the best sandbags. Um, and I've got like 7 of them. Got a bunch of other ones too, like all scattered around. So yeah, I use them with all of them, kettlebell carries, everything. But yeah, you're right. I I think the closest we ever got was the football guys that stayed at Salisbury. And when me and Andy had some equipment there, we would do some. It was kind of a way to entice the linemen to stay and some of the players to stay. So we were doing like log cleans with the linemen that stayed over summer. It was perfect for them. We did bench with it too because it was the only neutral bench we had, and it was basically doing a floor press or was doing a pin press or anything like that with the log. Like the guys loved it too, and it was something new. But yeah, like you don't want to get so crazy that you're training a sport with another sport and one that is harder to scale. Like an Atlas stone, like like the first Atlas stone you picked up was, I think it was the 231 or whatever my
Mhm.
like small one was. Guess what was before that? A 10-pound med ball. If you really want to like see how to grip it with your forearms, there's no comparison. There's no comparison at all. Um, so it's harder to scale when you think about it. So like you got to think like risk reward and you got to think safety when you're coming to your athletes, because the last thing I want to do is explain to like one of my baseball coaches why a concrete ball broke like his Friday night starter's ankle. Like it's not a good thing to say that it rolled out of the Target parking lot. No, it didn't. That's not how it works. But no, that's I think set and setting is kind of big, equipment space, the time of the year, and then like just what your overall purpose is. Like the most of the time when I implement it, it's kind of as competition. Well, at least with the sports I have now, some of the collision sports and contact sports are like, especially wrestling, I could do anything with them. Like strongman was perfect for them. My lacrosse guys and football, like them picking sandbags up and carrying them or holding them or bracing them or getting pushed around is the same thing they're going to get when someone comes for your head when you're trying to pick up a ground ball. It's like if you don't brace and lean your shoulder into them, you're going into next week. And then some of the other teams, it's like core and postural stuff. it's so easy to like do carries or even marches in place or just like isometric holds with those things. Then they're not strongman, but they're strongman-esque and they can build up to like more dynamic work. And that's kind of the big things. Competition, conditioning, obviously like prowlers, like you or put a golf cart or put your own truck in neutral, push that around and tell me you don't feel good after that or feel really bad after that. It's all mindset at that point. But yeah, I try to find ways to kind of put it in. Um, I think there's a lot of benefits for it. It's just it's difficult to add unless you've got all the other pieces kind of in line, because I don't want that to be the main element for it. I want it to be supplementary work for them, unless it's purposeful conditioning, core, or purposeful like a competition kind of style stuff. But you got to scale it the right way for sure.
Yeah, the one thing that I like that you said is don't train a sport with another sport. And I guess maybe we should have started off with like the actual sport of strongman. For you, you show up to a competition, like what does that look like? And then for me, the training has always made sense of like, like you're talking about like scalable conditioning or scalable like postural stuff or core stuff. Like those aspects made sense to me of like carrying things. And like for a long time I was doing strongman Saturday every Saturday of spring training and I had no implements, so I was like, taking all of our bands and like tying plates together, and that was my Atlas stone. Or I was like doing Zercher carries outside in the heat, or like I'd put a yoke bar on my back and just walk laps around the complex. It's not strongman in the sense of the actual competition, but the concepts and the principles kind of carried over for me that just made me a strong man. So maybe we should take a step back and like talk specifically competition. Like one, what is the highest level that you've gone? Like you've been at nationals, right? And then like what does a competition look like? And then how does that differ from like what a training session would look like if you don't have the equipment, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah, like you kind of said it. It's funny now that I think nowadays people are like, well, if you don't have the specific implement, it's not strongman. Strongman's gotten kind of gear whore and real bougie. I think that's why I have so much stuff. Like I like collecting it, but I like using it all. I mean, as much as I can with it. But you, to your point, you can get by with just about anything. That's the cool part about it. Like it really was just all farm equipment, stones, random stuff. We just found a way to kind of fabricate it. In the beginning, people were doing it like randomly. Like I remember we built a prowler for one of the football guys and he got it welded by his like girlfriend's dad. And like Elite FTS is like the prowlers that I've used for the longest time. And like Andy's, I think is like 60 or 80 pounds, like the normal like prowler. I think Jeremy's was about 150 and it had a steel base plate like down the middle so you could put stuff on it. So that thing already was a low rider. It was built. It was rough. But yeah, you can get creative with any of the stuff. It's when you start actually competing, it looks a little bit different because you know in advance usually what you're going to go do. Most competitions, if they're one day or like 5 or 6 events, for the most part, you know all of them. Sometimes people are starting to get a few mystery events in, and you usually know the weights and you know your weight class and stuff ahead of time. It's getting interesting across the board. Some places have a like team ones, so like it's all team lifts. Like I don't like I don't want to be paired up with someone that's 6'2" and we're both doing a deadlift at the same time. No thanks. Um, but it's cool to kind of like see it grow and like go in different directions. But 2 day events are usually like 3 events and they kind of split it in half. I've never actually had to do a 2 day event. The only time I was signed up for one, it got canceled and they moved it and made it back to one day. So I'm kind of happy that they did that, but it's it's usually some sort of press. usually some sort of like deadlifts, some sort of like either load or carry kind of medley event. Um, Stones are pretty traditional. Sandbags kind of are easier and you can scalable. So sometimes those go back and forth. And that's usually kind of like what the general makeup of it is, like a press, a deadlift, a carry, a medley of some sort. And yeah, they mix and match. That's what's really cool about it. Like the variety, even the implements you get, like you use someone's log, you go to another competition, it feels completely different, even if it's a 12-inch log and it's the same exact weight, completely different. You use a Conan's wheel. I use one Conan's wheel in a competition, and I trained all like a couple months leading up to it with just a chain yoke that I made. Like Zercher carried it, and then I would walk straight some days, and some days I would kind of arc it because you can't walk in a complete circle without that like fulcrum in the middle. And I got there, and the middle was swinging, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm prepared for this." That shit buried me. I picked it up, and it kept swinging like an anchor. And then I took a first step, and then my whole back whipped. It was brutal. But like you'll never know what that is until you go and actually like try it. So it was like so much fun. Um, but it doesn't really differ too much. Like as you go up in levels, what really happens is um, the competition gets harder. Um, Guys are like starting to actually like be really strict, cut weight. Like some guys are sponsored, like they're dedicating a lot of time to it. The weights obviously go up immensely when you get to some of the higher ones, and they're doing like full max reps for a certain amount of time, or it's like build the bar up, or like silver dollar deadlifts where they're getting heavier and heavier and heavier every single time until someone maxes out. Um, but then once you get to like the pro level, it's a little bit different. Never competed internationally, just nationals, and nationals gets hard too because more and more people qualify. So it becomes a clusterfuck of a ton of people everywhere. And it's very different than like a local event where they usually cap it between like some places 8, like all the way up to like 12, 15, maybe even 20. And they might split it into subdivisions, but you're a little bit more aware of how much time you're going to have in between. If it's a competition run smooth. These are all most of the people that put these local competitions on probably don't get paid much money. They're like, go to a CrossFit gym, they got the space, they'll bring in some revenue, maybe there's a food truck, whatever it is. Nationals is different because it's usually like in the US, like two main federations that kind of run it. It's like Strongman Corporation and USS, United States Strongman. International, there's like strongman leagues, and then official strongman games, and there's a few others like once you get up to like pro status to like win your pro card. Those ones are run real well, and those are invite only, but everything else is a little bit different. Like you're kind of going by the flow, and you just got to be prepared for anything. Like I've been there for misloads. I've been there for equipment breaking. I was I was there for one where they misloaded a deadlift by like 60 pounds on one side. And I like picked it up the first time, and I was like, I am dead set in the middle of this axle. And I would try to pick it up again, and it like started slide my slid all the way to the side. So I like changed my grip, and they found out what it was, and they're like, "Ooh, we misloaded." I was like, "Nah, everybody behind me's got to do the same weight. We're doing the same shit." And they're like, "You're right. That's how it's gotta go." So I was like, "Sucks for everybody else. Here we go." Um, but yeah, it's different when you start competing with it. Um, but getting your hands on those different implements and testing the stuff out, it's pretty cool. And like you said, like to pull a truck, I got to pull a F-18 one time. I've I pulled a semi. I was supposed to pull an ambulance, and they bailed out one day. I'm trying to convince my unit to let us pull some of the dozers and stuff, but I've heard you can't pull tracks at all. Like it won't move. So I'm trying to get like some of the big transport unit trucks and trying to put on a show for my army unit. I think that'd be fun. But yeah, it's pretty cool competing. I miss that element, being around like other people, but getting your hands on the implements and and just like going in now I got the garage. I don't have to go to a unit anymore, but it's been pretty fun to like get the variety and um get the dynamic between training because training is you've done strongman Saturdays. It's usually like 3 hours. You do like a couple implements. I'm kind of unique. I wrote an article about this because I don't know how many people train by themselves too, but it's a completely different beast versus having teammates when you train. So vastly different, like what you end up doing in that timeline. But training is usually lower key, volume is a lot more. You might max out like one or two things at time, but once you get to competition, it's like it's balls to the wall. You're fat man resting. Like some guys are eating cheeseburgers on the side. Some people are just like eating Skittles and like sipping water. And then you got an hour downtime until you do the next event. It's very different. It's very different from training versus competing, but they're both super fun.
Yeah, the like I said, for me, the appeal was just like the problem solving aspect of like something physical. And earlier you said like you go from like a 10-pound med ball to a 230-pound stone. And I can remember like the first time we did the stone, like my forearms are getting crushed and I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm like, I've got it in my lap. And it's like, no, do this, do this. And you're like trying to wrestle this stone and like figure the problem out. But it's also this 230-pound stone. So like that aspect of it was always fun to me. And then I never competed because I was always, well, one, like the baseball schedule was like, 7 months of the year I'm at like these random gyms that I'm like, I can't set up equipment and they don't have strongman. And then in the off season, by the time I feel strong enough, it's like time to go. Like, two, I weighed like 210 pounds and the classes were like 220 or 198. And I was like, well, I'm not strong enough to be in 220 because some of these numbers are really, like you said, they post them ahead of time. I'm like, I can't do these. And then I also don't want to cut 12 pounds just to like say that I competed. So I kind of fell in like this weird place where I was like strong, but I wasn't strong enough to be with the monsters, but I was too big to be with people below me. And even in like 198, people were freaks. And then, when like I said, when I was a kid, it was all the heavyweights. And nowadays there's like weight classes. There's male and female. There's like all of the implements. I think, like you said, it's gotten almost a little bougie of like it was on ESPN. It kind of went mainstream. Like, which is good. Like it's gaining popularity, but at the same time, there's like the section that I see of like, oh, these are the very specific, like you'll never do this because, like you said, Rogue, like they built it in the building, so like you'll never use this specific implement, but you can make your own Conan's wheel with like a landmine attachment on top of a box and somebody holding it
Ugh.
down. Like it gets really like strange. So like the aspect of it that I really always was like it always appealed to me was just the raw like farm strength, man strength, like unorthodox strength, and then the conditioning aspect of like you're wrestling this prowler out in the middle of the street like for 60 seconds and then you die for like 10 minutes and then you come back to life and then you go deadlift something else. Like it just was like an interesting combination of like athleticism, pure strength, like mental side of things, the conditioning, and like all of those aspects to me made sense of like there's got to be a way to implement this with athletes. And so the sandbag carries have like in my mind been really beneficial. When we were living in Arizona, we had 100-pound sandbag and a 200-pound sandbag, and I'd go out there in 100 degrees and just carry the bag around in my neighborhood and like drop it, pick it up, walk around, do some lunges. Like it sucks, but it always felt like this like bridge of traditional strength training and like being on the field. And like there's only so many things that you can do with a barbell to like increase athleticism. And you may think you're strong, but the second you have to pick up a 200-pound sandbag off the ground, you're like, shit, I'm kind of weak. Like this is way different. And then like you said, you go out in the sport and like if you're not ready for the contact, like you're gonna get pushed over, no matter how much like you squat. Like if you don't have some of the like that raw strength. So for me, those principles always made sense to me. And like it's just fun. Like I said, you do a strongman Saturday, you get a couple of your friends, you bury them, and then you go and like step on top of them and like deadlift over them, and like you're the king. You know what I mean? But like, you talk about Andy, you talk about Mike, like you think about that Salisbury weight room, like I've always told people like I'm average strength, and they're like, dude, you're a beast. Like, I'm like, no, if you knew the people I was hanging out with, I had a conversation with Hedleski one day, and in the middle of the conversation, he was like, hey, give me 1 second. He walked over, he picked up like 700 for like a double and put it back down and just continued the conversation. And I was like, that might be the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like I've never seen somebody deadlift 700 ever, even with like a freak out, like, sniffing the smelling salt, like smacking their head. And he was like having a conversation like you and I are having. And he was like, 1 second, please. Boom, boom. Yeah. So anyways, about the chicken farm that I'm like, what just happened? You know what I
He's
mean? So
wild.
for me, I'm like, I'm not, I can hold my own, but it's like I see these people and I'm like, these are like monsters. And I'm like, these are the kind of people I need to hang around with. And then Greg was there too.
Oh
And
yeah.
Greg was like the king of pressing. That he'd come in with his cat laser shirt and like 300-pound log. And I'm like, these people are animals. I'm getting crushed. And I'm like, but I love this. Like the environment is really cool. And I think there's a lot of like legitimate carryover between like the training aspect and the principles, not necessarily the competitions and everything, and like giving it to athletes. And I would agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm not just going to have athletes pick up stones and like drop them on their foot. If I do, it's fine. Like I just have a broken foot, but like I don't need you to miss a start because you were trying to pick up a stone. And like
Yeah.
I've always wanted to put one in the weight room at Fenway, and I'm like, can't do it because if I did, like somebody's gonna try to pick it up, drop it through the floor, throw it out a window, drop it on themselves. So once I have a house and a backyard and an established area, I might just only pick up stones so I can just carry them around like a maniac.
Yeah. Landscaping, beautification.
Yeah. So hey, that the stone would look better over there. Okay, I got it. No problem. I'll put it over there. But no, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, this is not strongman, but podcast wise, by the time this one drops, you will have been far past 100 episodes. So one, congrats to you on 100 episodes, 100 plus episodes. Like it's really hard to hold a podcast that long. Two, like what are some of the like coolest things you've either learned or stories you've heard or like people you've talked to on there, that one maybe I can steal for this one, and then two, just like if there's any valuable lessons to take from your time podcasting.
No, I appreciate it, man. I mean, you kind of helped me a lot in the beginning to get it like launched off the ground. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I first kind of started it too. Back at Fresno, like during that COVID time, I always really enjoyed like traveling and going to see other schools. Like when I had the opportunity to go with some of my teams, because I kind of found it fascinating to go see other people's schools. I like facilities and everything too. So maybe one day Samson will let me tour the facility and hire me to start selling equipment or something one day. But because I love Legos and I love architecture, so it's like it's just big kid Legos basically, and I get to lift with it too. It's like a perfect match. So no, it was fun, and COVID was hard, and I had so many teams that I wasn't really able to hit the road as much as I was, and I was coming from a place that was pretty heavily populated with other schools. Like when I was in DC and I was in like that DMV area, you can be at like Georgetown and throw a rock and hit another 5 schools. You can drive an hour and a half north of Philly and there's like 45 universities there, not Division 1, but like 45 different schools like within that area. Like even here, like at Jacksonville, I was at 2 Division 1 schools that are like 5 miles apart and in the same conference. Like when I was at Fresno, I didn't have any of that. Like, I think the nearest like bigger school that I knew for sure had a strength coach was like 2.5 hours away. So if I wanted to like go reach out and network and kind of meet people, and I like to meet people in their place, which is the only thing that kind of sucks about the podcast, not being able to do it in person and like do it in their facility, which I think would be the best thing ever. Like go to their dojo and talk to them about what they do there in the moment. The next best thing I could do was just talk to them. And it kind of just grew from there. Got a bunch of my friends on, and I always wanted it to be people that were, and that was the whole theme of the show, people that were coaches and competitors. And they didn't have to like actually compete in a competition, but like they had to actually embrace training in some sort of aspect and like really like it and practice what they preach. Otherwise, I don't really respect you as a coach. You don't have to be the best in the world. You have to be the strongest, but you have to be able to like get under the bar and have a little bit of sweat equity and give a shit about what you're doing if you're going to tell athletes to kind of do the same thing. So it allowed me to meet a lot of people too as it started to progress. Some people have reached out, like I'm trying to wrap up everything to kind of like just review all the stuff that's happened. I've had plenty of people on I still haven't met in person. I think the coolest thing is meeting people in person after I've done it. Like when I go to the national conference, um, I talk to people that like are at huge jobs now from like where they were as GAs. I think cool thing too is a lot of people they'll get off the show and they'll be like, "That was fun. That was my first podcast." I was like, "Oh shit, really?" Like that's cool. Um, and I just try to make it as easy going as possible because I mean, just doing it all as it's time consuming as you know too, but to me it's just worth it to have those conversations. And had a bunch of people on from across the board, like not in just college, high school, tactical setting. Some guys that played in the NFL, some guys that played pro strongman, just a little bit of everything too. And I can't think of one in particular that was like really cool besides having some of my mentors actually agree to be on. I'm still trying to track down one who was dodging me so hard, but he also dodges everybody else, and he knows exactly who he is, Captain Carl. Um, but no, it's been super fun. I thought about like it was moving across the country made it difficult, and I thought about hanging it up, but like I pushed it to go bi-weekly and I was like, I can sustain this. I can keep doing this. I enjoy it when it's that and it doesn't feel like so much like work. Because like behind the scenes sometimes it is a lot of work and scheduling things, but it's the conversations I've had, like the people that have reached out about it, the sponsors that I have for the show, those guys are great too. Like Ken at Cerberus, Andy, and all the guys over at Samson. Like those guys have been super helpful and pretty supportive about the show too, and like helping promote it. So I'm thankful to have all that kind of in line with the show to kind of keep it going. So as long as there's more than just me and my parents listening to it, I'll keep doing it for a little bit. And who knows what'll happen. I don't know. I don't know if I have a deadline or when I'll end up stopping, but I think in some aspect I'll do it in a certain way. I think you probably feel the same way too. Like maybe you won't make it so rigid where it's like it has to come out of this time. Um, but I think I'll do it in some way or another for a while.
Yeah, that's the kind of the impetus of this one is like the other one I've been doing, the PBS CCS podcast. I'm up to like over 170 episodes, and like it's kind of within the context of like professional baseball strength and conditioning. So like the two sides of it are, one, like when I started it, I wanted people in professional baseball to have a voice. And so for me, I get the same thing as you, like, oh, wow, that was my first podcast. That was really awesome. I'm glad we got to do it. And then, I get to meet new coaches in baseball. And then over the years, I've watched them either grow up in the field or like move on and do other things and go other places. And, for me, this one is more of like, I'm just going to interview whoever I want. And like, I don't give a shit if they've coached baseball. I don't give a shit if they've, played rugby or like ultimate frisbee. Like, I just want to talk to people who are within the performance aspect, whatever that means in terms of, mental skills or nutrition or strength and conditioning, athletic trainers. Even I've had former athletes on here. So it's like, I've made good friends and good relationships from my other podcasts, even just within baseball. And I'm like, I feel like I can take that and make those same friendships and relationships outside of baseball and meet new people and learn new things. And, it's been good for me on that one, but it's getting to the point where, like you said, it feels more like work because I've done so many of them and I feel like I don't want to say I've tapped it out, but like it's gone on a really long time, and I'm like, man, I want to have these conversations with other people who do strongman for fun, or like, they run ultra marathons. I don't know, like, and then I talk to you, and then you're like, dude, you should check out a conversation with this person, and then I go to that person, and before you know it, they're like, you're here, and then before you know it, you don't know who you're talking to, but like you're learning, you're creating a new circle of people. Like that was always the appeal to me. It was just I was like, I'm going to do the baseball thing first. And I did it for so long. And so I'm glad now that I have this platform because then I can have you on instead of you interviewing me for the other one and me rambling about fucking nothing for however long it was. Like, I can have you come on and actually have coherent ramblings instead. So I appreciate your friendship over the years, man. I appreciate your mentorship. I appreciate you being honest and open and talking strongman, dude. That's kind of I owe a lot to you in the field, a lot more than you probably realize. Just where I was when I started, and you took somebody that didn't know what the fuck they're doing and showed them a little bit of what to do and how to be a strength coach and also have some fun with Atlas Stone. So I appreciate it. Before we shut it down, is there anything else that we missed? Strongman podcast, life, anything that you want to close out with?
No, man, I appreciate your friendship too. It was I think we all kind of get into that start of our career, and it really could be make or break based off of who you really kind of gravitate towards, like your first experience in the profession, because that really can shape what you think the profession is. So I got that from other guys at Salisbury. I got that like from another guy that helped me at a commercial gym, like back at home in Maryland too. Like not no relation to me, but like Kevin O'Brien, like he was jacked. He was a huge professional. He was a pro bodybuilder and he was a firefighter chief or captain for like 25 years. And like that guy took me under his wing too. Like, so I remembered how many times people helped me over the career, and I was kind of the same as Andy. I'd give people a chance, and as soon as like I could see that you didn't want to be in it, I torched you. You got a shitty nickname and you were on the kill wall like right away. I got the list still of all those terrible interns. But no, it's you've done awesome things with your career, and like springboarded everything that you did. I didn't know what the hell I was doing with baseball at Salisbury. I still don't know. Just don't tell my team that I'm working with now. Because obviously you're with the Red Sox. But no, it's I got nothing really else. I appreciate you having me on. It's obviously like you've been doing it for a long time. So now everybody can check out my podcast if they want to kind of see what that's all about. The Strength Game podcast. You can kind of listen to it anywhere, or go to just coachobrien.com and you can kind of see all the episodes, or you can go to samsonequipment.com and you can see all the articles that I write for them there. But no, it's I appreciate you having me on today, man. It was good to chop it up again too, and it's cool to be on like a little bit of loose form. That's how I like to roll.
Yeah, it's always the best to just kind of let our non-existent hair down and let it ride, man. So it's been good to catch up, and we'll definitely catch up again soon.
You got it, man.